Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gosztola, and welcome to this edition of the Dissenter Update. It is July 14th. In the time since I last published an episode, we have seen discussion about what is a dismal moment for freedom of the press. There are people who have written about us losing freedom of the press because of the fact that Paramount Global settled for $16 million with President Donald Trump in a frivolous lawsuit over a 60 Minutes interview that Kamala Harris did, how it was presented by 60 Minutes. It was a shakedown. It's with Steve Croft, who had been a long time correspondent or anchor for 60 Minutes, and has said, others have said it as well. There's definitely bribery that should be looked into. Bribery because of the fact that Skydance and Paramount were merging, and if they did not settle, that merger would likely be blocked by the Trump administration. We have other stories to get to, and a major development related to freedom of the press and the way that ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, threatens the First Amendment. I'm going to speak to Tina-Desiree Berg, or share a conversation I had with Tina-Desiree Berg of Status Coup. And she recently won, and other journalists among her won, an injunction to stop the Los Angeles Police Department from firing rubber bullets and other projectiles at journalists at demonstrations. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But first, if you could go to the dissenter.org/donate, go to the dissenter.org/donate. Support this show. The show is intended to help boost the Dissenter Newsletter that covers whistleblowing and government secrecy, as well as press freedom, like attacks on journalism, which will be a main part of the interview in this week's show. And you can subscribe by going to the dissenter.org. If you go to the dissenter.org, become a subscriber for a few bucks a month, you'll be also making this kind of journalism possible on a regular basis. I think more than anything now, we need this kind of journalism that focuses on defending our rights as citizens, and also training people's attention on how we can hold the powerful accountable. We have to hold them accountable. And so we'll get to the stories. I have several headlines lined up for you, and then my conversation with Tina. So you might have seen the interview that I did with George Maschke of Anti-Polygraph, a former military intelligence person who failed an FBI polygraph test and ended up going on to expose the unreliability of these tests, which are now being used extensively by the Trump administration. We have a story, and we'll begin this week's headlines with FBI using lie detector tests to identify disloyal personnel. The New York Times reporter Adam Goldman reports that FBI personnel are being asked in lie detector tests whether they have ever spoken negatively about FBI Director Kash Patel or FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. It could be what is known as a control question, a question designed to help those administering the test determine whether the person taking the test is giving truthful answers to other questions. Nonetheless, this is part of a widespread crackdown on government employees to discourage communication with anyone in the press, and it is owed to the extraordinarily thin-skinned nature of Patel, Bongino, and others in the Trump administration, who demand allegiance from all personnel. So if you'd like more on what's happening with the Trump administration and polygraphs, go listen to or watch the interview with George Maschke, who's quite the expert, one of the few voices out there who knows how these lie detector tests are unreliable and are at this moment extensively being abused. Moving on, appeals court says lower court shouldn't have dismissed lawsuit against Pegasus manufacturer. The United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit sided with journalists and other staff at El Faro, who sued Israeli spyware developer NSO Group Technologies for allegedly using spyware known as Pegasus to target them. El Faro is a Salvadoran newspaper, and the appeals court ruled that the District Court for the Northern District of California abused its discretion when the court dismissed the case on March 8, 2024. One of the plaintiffs, El Faro co-founder Carlos Dada, alleges that between July 2020 and June 2021, his iPhone 11 was hacked at least 12 times and that active infections persisted on the device for at least 167 days. He used Facebook, Instagram, Signal, Telegram, Twitter, and WhatsApp to communicate with family, friends, sources, and colleagues. He stored photos and videos as well as confidential and leaked documents and work-related documents and drafts that were edited on Google Drive. Our next story involves the Las Vegas police, and they were sued for concealing immigration enforcement files. The ACLU of Nevada sued the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for withholding records related to the department's cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The lawsuit seeks a court order to force the release of documents that detail the police's Foreignborn, I put Foreignborn in quotes, booking policy, as well as the parameters of a 287G agreement with ICE. Those agreements are ICE partnerships with local police forces. When the Lake and Riley Act passed in January 2025, Las Vegas police adopted a policy that expanded the charges that would be reported to ICE after a so-called foreign person was jailed. This vague policy increases the likelihood that U.S. citizens and documented individuals could be wrongfully detained by ICE, according to the ACLU of Nevada. Up next, Oklahoma Attorney General rules against Education Department's cooked-up secrecy after Oklahoma Watch, an investigative journalism organization, sought keycard data for Matt Langston, the Oklahoma Education Department's chief policy advisor. The Oklahoma Education Department denied the request and claimed it was exempt under an anti-terrorism provision that allows the government to keep, quote, schematics or security monitoring, end quote, documents from the public. But now Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond's office has ruled that the key card data should be disclosed. Oklahoma Watch sought the key card data as part of an investigation into the state education department's hiring practices, quote, including at least 3 highly paid staff members who have little or no public education experience but extensive careers in political strategy, end quote. Langston is the head of a political consulting firm in Austin, Texas, and several lawmakers have suggested that Langston is a ghost employee, meaning someone on the payroll who isn't actually performing any responsibilities. Next up, death threats over political cartoon forced the cancellation of a journalism event. In Buffalo, New York, the Buffalo Newspaper Guild was forced to cancel an event in support of local journalism after death threats were made against Pulitzer Prize winner Adam Ziglas and his family for a cartoon about the response to catastrophic flooding in Texas by Texas officials and Trump administration officials. The event was supposed to occur at a gallery of Ziglas's work. I'll show you the cartoon. And it's got swept away, ... at the top. There's a sign for a Texas county. There's a person in a MAGA hat with a sign that reads help. And also that MAGA person is saying government is the problem, not the solution. And this was a cartoon by Adam Ziglas, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner, past Pulitzer Prize winner. The Guild said, "We wholly condemn the individuals who have chosen to twist a positive public event into an attempt to terrorize and silence Ziglas. spread fear among journalists and their supporters, and distort the mission of a free press. Ziglis himself responded, "Threats to me and my family are never an acceptable response to disagreeing with an editorial cartoon." The event will be rescheduled according to the Buffalo Newspaper Guild. And then, in a last story, briefly, a short, Texas AG Paxton gives up appeal against $6.6 million settlement to whistleblowers, as is involving Attorney General Ken Paxton. He isn't just losing his wife, he dropped his appeal in a case brought against him by whistleblowers who alleged they were fired for reporting Paxton to the FBI, according to the Texas Tribune. The whistleblowers will be paid a $6.6 million settlement. That's to be paid out by the Texas state. The state government will have to foot the bill, not Paxton himself. And so they have to appropriate that money, but those whistleblowers will receive funds for the retaliation that they experienced at the hands of Ken Paxton. Those are the headlines for the week. And let's get to our interview with Tina-Desiree Berg. Tina-Desiree Berg is a host, correspondent with Status Coup. She's been on the ground in Los Angeles covering ICE operations, protests against ICE, generally been at the center of a lot of the developments we've seen with militarized policing and Trump deploying Homeland Security or ICE or even the National Guard to protect masked men who are essentially kidnapping and abducting immigrants from streets and workplaces and parking lots and farms, and we saw in the last 10 days. So I talked to Tina. She was a plaintiff in a lawsuit that challenged violations of journalist rights. She's a freelance writer and has had her work appear in Unicorn Riot and in other venues, other platforms. So here is my conversation with Tina, and then I'll come back for some words to close out the show. All right, everyone. I'm really pleased to be joined by Tina-Desiree Berg, who's based in Los Angeles. And as I introduced her, with Status Coup, also a freelance writer, and fresh off of a legal victory, winning an injunction against the Los Angeles police who have been shooting rubber bullets at journalists like her, firing other projectiles. So welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, glad to be on. I'm always happy to talk about press freedom issues.
Yeah, and so I saw Tina earlier last week, and she was part of a Freedom of the Press Foundation event that was extremely engaging and filled with insights about what journalists on the front lines are facing, particularly in LA, as they go to ICE. Not protests, but they go to the scenes of ICE operations largely, although there have been demonstrations in which there have been, we'll call them skirmishes for lack of a better word. And so I wanted to dig into that because I've been thinking about ICE as a press freedom issue. I've been thinking about the way in which they are targeting these communities, not necessarily being one that impacts those who have immigrated from, we'll say, the global south, but also that it is a really widespread issue for us as journalists that we'll need to deal with, and that we need to deal with now because there's like $170 billion of new money going to ICE. I want you to dig into that, but just first, let's take a moment. I want you to appreciate with me what happened. So you were one of the lawsuits that were filed against the response to ICE and these protests, and a judge sided with journalists and said the LAPD needs to stop shooting journalists. Can you talk about that victory?
Right. So we actually have now filed for an injunction against multiple agencies. The first that we just won the TRO on Friday, that's the LAPD, but we've also filed for injunctions against DHS and all of its alphabet soup underlings, HSI, ICE, Border Patrol, they're all, housed there. And then also the Sheriff's Department. So the first step was LAPD. We got our TRO on Friday. The judge basically ruled that they cannot use, less lethal, they're still lethal munitions against press members. And this has been happening a lot, whether it's intentionally by design. I'm going to shoot this journalist. I think there's a few clear cut examples of that. I think the Australian reporter who was doing the live that got hit in the back, there were no protesters around here. So I don't know why that guy did that other than he was targeting her. Um, but I also think this will make the environment much safer for the protesters as well. If they have to pay attention to who they're shooting at, they're going to be less likely to just randomly spray a bunch of less lethals out into the universe, which is what you see them doing. And in fact, this got little press attention, but one of the days of the protests, the LASD, the Sheriff's Department, actually started firing less lethals at the LAPD. And you could hear on the radio, it's pretty funny. You could hear the LAPD officers on the radio transmission tell the LASD to stop firing at us. They're hitting us. So, I mean, that goes to show you they just do this so carelessly and recklessly, and it is quite dangerous.
And so, okay, so this is going to help make things a little bit safer. Of course, the excuse that they like to give, just for people who might like a little additional background, the excuse they usually give is that there's so many journalists now that don't come from the legacy media outlets, and then they're difficult to identify, and it's hard to be distinguished between who is a protester and who isn't. I mean, that tells you though that like they really do believe it's open season on protesters
Yeah.
to just shoot and fire at them.
Absolutely. And in this particular case, the last couple of weeks, they even had kettled CNN reporters. So they were not being discriminate about separating freelancers from what you would consider mainstream media cable outlets. They were just full bore going after everybody. But the state of California is a little bit unique because we actually have a law here, it's Penal Code 497, that protects journalism. We decided in the state that just having, we always have the basic fundamental First Amendment rights, right? But we decided in the state of California that wasn't enough. So the LA Press Club, who I'm a longtime member of, they are also a plaintiff in all of these injunctions. We worked with other entities to come up with some legislation that is designed to protect press members at protests. So when they call an unlawful assembly, they cannot tell us to leave. They were intending to do that previously. Obviously can't fire munitions at us. They can't tell us we can't film them. They can't tell us we can't cross a police line. As long as we're not interfering in those operations, we're supposed to have the freedom to do that. But we've also seen violations of that at the protests. The bottom line is a lot of these guys aren't familiar with the law, even though it is the law. I have repeatedly asked multiple LAPD officers at skirmish lines, what does 4097 say? Every time I get a response, it's incorrect. So clearly there has been a disconnect between these two things. And I don't think Jim McDonnell, who is the current LAPD chief, has any interest in changing that, right? Michael Moore, the previous police chief, actually did. And he was very transparent with Adam Rose, who was our LA Press Club member that deals with law enforcement issues. They were having multiple conversations. All of that changed when Jim McDonnell became police chief. He has taken it much backwards. He won't even talk to Adam, I believe. Adam might be a good interview for you at some point too.
Oh, absolutely. He's on my list to reach out
Yeah.
to and talk with. So we've seen this militarized response to all of the communities that are outraged at ICE being in their neighborhoods. And so, can you just speak though? It seemed like another escalation. You always are I'm stunned at the way that they have been able to constantly escalate, but it seemed like an escalation over the last 7 to 10 days because
Yeah.
they're now going on to farms and
Right.
just directly targeting workers rather than waiting for day laborers at Home Depot.
So there's been a slow escalation from jump. I think a few things I want to point out. DHS has been engaging in illegal and unconstitutional activity that's not even up for debate. One of the things that I noticed, for example, early on was they were removing their license plates from their vehicles. So you would see clear immigration raids with detainees with masked. I mean, they look like armed bank robbers, right? These guys. It's ridiculous that these are federal agents. and they would be driving cars with no license plates on the front or the back. But then as I started to dig deeper into the license plate thing, I'm actually working on a story on this right now. I discovered that they were also using license plates that do not correspond with the vehicle that they're on. So I traced the license plate number and come to find the last time it was registered was in 2022 to a completely different vehicle. I have now found 4 license plates that have been used on multiple DHS vehicles at raids. I kid you not. So all of these things are incredibly illegal. And, obviously the broader concern here is if they're doing that and they feel like that's fine, we can get away with this. What happens when we see more car accidents? We've already seen 2, right? Where ICE agents have got into car accidents, fled the scene. The one in Boyle Heights, for example, the LAPD is actually investigating as a hit and run. But now, what is the recourse for these victims when the license plate on the back of the vehicles don't correspond with the actual car? There's a reason that the state of California has vehicle codes that require you to have, correct registered plates on your car on the front and the back. So apparently, these guys don't think they have to do that. Another example would be there was an agent that we had seen at the East Hollywood Home Depot who was very aggressive. He ended up tackling and arresting a guy that was filming him. The guy was a US citizen. Didn't matter, arrested him, took him away, right? Disappeared him for a couple days. Turns out that guy has now also been arrested in Long Beach, California, which is a little bit south of us, for getting drunk in public, following a woman into a restroom to sexually harass her. And then when the bar calls the police, he actually assaulted one of the Long Beach police officers. So these are the kinds of things that we're seeing out there in the world. So when you apply that sort of personality to the kind of work that they're doing, it becomes very unglued very quickly, right? So, Camarillo yesterday, the farm you're talking about there, that was very violent. I saw an officer in Pasadena pull a gun on a guy and he literally said, "I will fucking shoot you" to the guy. The guy ended up just speeding away. He didn't shoot him, thank God. I thought, oh shit, he's going to shoot him. But these are the kinds of things they're doing. I also saw a couple of agents had taken. So this is one more wild story. I had seen online that they had kidnapped, abducted, whatever you want to call this. I understand why people are using those words, because how else do you describe armed people with masks on? You have no idea who they are. They don't have warrants. You ask them for a warrant. They won't even show you. So ICE has these, not like a court ordered warrant, but they have these administrative warrants sometimes that they'll show you. They don't have any teeth, and people should honestly just ignore them because they're not court orders. But they're not even producing those at this point, right? So I wanted to go to the scene and investigate this, and I noticed that we're Pasadena police on hand as well. The Pasadena police, it turns out, did confirm that they were ICE agents, that they had decided to take this woman. They did not have any kind of warrant, the police said. But having said that, I'm on my way to go talk to these guys, and I look out to the side of the road and I see a whole contingent of what are clearly ICE agents on the side of the freeway. So I get off the freeway, speed around, I come up to the side to see what's going on there. And I kid you not, Kevin, one of the guys goes over and starts peeing on the side of the road. It's like, what? Really? Like, come on, man. Like, everybody can see you on the freeway. There's like kids around here. It's a public park area, it's a rec area. So it was pretty gross. And then 2 days later, you had that report that came out that they were all peeing at that preschool. So, I mean, the lawlessness of these folks is unbelievable. I don't know where they're finding them, honestly. They're not well trained. They clearly don't have the right temperament to be doing this work. I believe they probably signed up for this job because they are racist and they want to deport everybody. They don't care if they're legal citizens or not. You're a brown person, we're going to racially profile you, and we're going to like nab you off the street and put you in the back of our van. And people need to understand that they are absolutely arresting people here that have every right to be here. So this idea that it's criminals, that it's illegal aliens, whatever rhetoric they're using is absolute nonsense. It's just not truthful.
We're seeing resignations from the ICE agency now, and I believe one of
Yeah.
them has even said, "Oh, they've decided they're not even going to go after drug smugglers or human traffickers anymore. They're just going to be rounding up
Yeah.
the migrants in these communities. So I'm out. I'm leaving. We're not fighting crime anymore. We're just
Yeah.
putting people in camps." When we watch the operations that are unfolding, it almost seems like they know that they're being lawless and that there's, you know, that they know that they're doing something that could get them in trouble in the
Yeah.
courts, and they know that they're doing things that they don't really want journalists to find out. That's obvious, and that's
Right.
why I want to bring up what's going on here with the Ice Block app that apparently doesn't have that many people on it, although I'm sure
No.
it's going to double or triple now because it's getting all this attention. But supposedly, before it was in the news, it only had like 20,000 people. Most of the users were based in and around the Los Angeles area, supposedly. But as it gets attention, I'm sure that it's going to balloon to several 100,000 users. Potential. It's on the Apple Store, and just the way it works is that you can report sightings. So I want to bring this up. Well, I'll show Christy Noam's thing and her reaction to it, but I think it's important to set up for people before we listen to, whatever vitriol or whatever
Yeah.
fascism is going to come out of the mouth of Christy. I think it's important for us to defend the right of the public to this information
Right.
from the government. What the Trump administration is very clearly saying right now, and I'll get your response to this, is that we don't have a right to know where ICE is going to be deployed in our communities. Your response?
Yeah, no, I think you're correct on that. They want to operate in secret. They've really turned into a form of secret policing, right? We don't need a warrant. I think going back to Trump 1.0 and the way they redefine what borders are is really important to the conversation as well, right? So now under this definition where it's 100 from like not just the border, but like the airport's a border, the water's a border. Like, I mean, literally 2/3 of the United States is now in a border area because of the way they're defining that. So it gives them the right to go around, they think, without probable cause, without a warrant, and just taking people off the street if they can. I think the reason they're masked up like this is because they do know what they're doing is wrong. They understand why people are angry, and people are angry. Let's be clear, like Trump can't paint this as some Antifa rebellion because that is not what this is. This is angering people across all age brackets, all walks of life. People don't want secret police. This is the United States. This is not supposed to be the way it is, right? So I think at base, they realize that, they recognize that. So they're doing this with the full mask. I mean, these masks are getting more ridiculous by the day. I saw a guy the other day that literally had one of those like full head ski, like literally what you would see like some bank robbers going in to do a thing. It was wild. I'm like, bro, what are you doing here? So I do think they know that, which is why I think the ones that choose to remain in that environment are down with that political agenda, right? They support that political agenda, which makes them even more dangerous in a way. So there's that aspect. And then Christy Nome doesn't seem to understand what constitutional rights are in the first place. I kind of go back to that moment where she was asked what due process was, and her response was to basically give a definition that is the exact opposite of due process. So in this country, we have a Fourth Amendment, we have a First Amendment, we have due process. That means you have a right to trial by your peers. You don't get to be called guilty just by the police because they say so. It's that simple. But she doesn't understand that. So I think a lot of people are coming around to this position that this administration is incredibly authoritarian.
Okay, so what I'm going to show here is apparently she was on the Hannity show in the last several days, and what she's speaking about, or I don't know exactly if Sean's question is included, if Sean Hannity's question is there, he might speak about the fact that CNN is investigating or is potentially being investigated just for the fact that they reported
On
that
it.
this app is out there. And so this is what she's talking about. So we'll play this clip.
Hey, Christy Nome is with us. Okay, 700% increase against agents, and you've got groups that are, and I had Pam Bondi on about this last night, they are warning people, are they not aiding and abetting in the law breaking? Are they not responsible for obstructing justice? And she was very open to looking into the criminality of it or potential criminality of it.
Yes, absolutely. I believe, in my opinion, that they are. And that's why I'm so thrilled that Pam is willing to be proactive and go after those individuals that would perpetuate this kind of activity against our law enforcement officers. These ICE agents.
So there you go. And that's,
Kevin, can I just point out, every time she says there's assaults against ICE agents, it's a different number. It's like, first it was 300%, then it was 40%, now it's 700%.
So I don't really know what they think they're gonna. I think the fact that they're not saying any particular law, my knowledge of journalism and the rights that we all have, I don't think there's really anything that they can nail CNN for reporting on the existence of an app. That's just them basically venting. I mean, they're venting. They're upset. They don't like that there's watchdog journalism happening. And so they're going to try to find a way to take it out on people. I do think it's crucial because, like, these communities are doing their own defense work and alerting others to the presence of ICE. And that probably might be how journalists are finding out that ICE are going to be. I don't know. It might be working both ways. Journalists might be learning where ICE is going to be, and community members might be learning where ICE is going to be, and then they deploy.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, regardless of which way, this is a First Amendment clearly protected free speech. I don't think they have a leg to stand on. The fact that they're trying to say that they do is ridiculous. How can you say people utilizing their First Amendment rights to say, like, I saw ICE over here, that's what they're doing, right? Is now aiding and abetting. That's criminality. That's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But it kills me that like people like Sean Hannity want to, criminalize that. That puts us on a slippery slope. At some point, Sean Hannity, Fox News, all these individuals are going to have conversations with themselves about, okay, they're only going after that group right now, and that's fine. And stop believing that could never affect you, right? In their brains, like, it's just them, I'm fine. But no, it puts you on a slippery slope. The whole point of legal aspects and law enforcement is that they have to be applied universally. The minute they're not and it's politicized, you've lost the game.
My last question is that we've seen this unprecedented threat develop to where it's targeting anybody who looks like they're foreign-born as a journalist. We have, I believe his name is Mario Guevara in Georgia, who's still in ICE custody. He was picked up, and I could include a clip of the video of how he got arrested or detained, because he basically gets pushed into the street, and then they say he's violating a law, so then he gets cuffed. But they're the ones that pushed him back. They told him to get off the grass. So in any case, he's in custody and could be deported to El Salvador, which has a concentration camp that Donald Trump and his administration are sponsoring. So we saw Rameza Ozturk be arrested because she co-authored an op-ed. Your response just to what it's like. I think this was something that Ben Camacho actually spoke to, of like looking like these people who are getting rounded up and feeling that while he's there covering these demonstrations. This threat to people who look foreign-born as journalists. What's your thoughts on all
I think it's very real. I think it's a very real threat, and Ben is right. He should be careful. These guys, I mean, what's to stop them from going after press with camera that look foreign-born when they're clearly just doing that with laborers, with farm workers, guys that are street vendors? I've seen them round up street vendors for just, with their push carts. Like, they are absolutely racially profiling people. This administration has been very clear how they feel about Mexican immigrants. They're incredibly racist. Stephen Miller's rhetoric is repulsive on so many levels, as is Trump's, but Stephen Miller's is almost worse. You listen to that number that Kristi Noem gave out a couple of weeks ago at a press conference of 14 million people. Well, that includes not just illegal immigrants, as she says. I don't think anybody's illegal. I'm like, we should have a better, in my opinion, just my sidebar on that is that we need to have a better way of handling asylum and getting citizenship to these people. It's almost impossible right now. But having said that, this 14 million number would include all of the legal Mexican immigrants that we have here. there's no two ways about it. Do the math. So it is obvious to me that their entire point is a white nationalist country. They want to get rid of brown folks. It's that clear. They've never hid their racism. You know, I go back again to Trump 1.0 because I think the roots of that were clear there, right? He was against immigration then. He had appointed Julie Kirshner, for example, who had been at FAIR organization, which is one of the John Tanton organizations. If you guys don't know who John Tanton is, please look him up. But he is a guy that was a eugenicist and advocated for overturning the 14th Amendment early on. He advocated for having zero immigration in the country that was legal and then deporting people that were not white. Like, he never hid his racism. He corresponded with all kinds of white nationalists and Nazis, whatnot. So many of his papers have been open to the public through FOIA requests at the University of Michigan. But point being is Julie Kirshner was his executive director of one of his nonprofits. So we know quite clearly what her viewpoint is. And under the first Trump administration, he appointed her at DHS too. So this is part of his schema, right? Is to just do that. So if you're a journalist and you're in that environment, you're now adding to that this layer of my job is to keep my eye on you, to make you accountable for anything you do, to expose the truth of the matter. You know, that's even more threatening for a lot of these guys. They clearly don't want them around. So, you know, we had a couple of journalists that have been arrested here. And for example, he was held in detention. They didn't let him out for what, 2-3 days. That's insane. You can't just arrest a journalist and hold them in without due cause. But that's what they're doing. They have no respect for the law. And so the fact that people are out there trying to stand up against this, not shocking. I mean, there are people in this country, even that voted for Trump, probably, that are like, yeah, this is not okay. You guys are violating constitutional rights. At some point, this has to end.
So you mentioned Stephen Miller, what he had to
Yeah.
say. He wasn't talking about your ruling. He was talking about a different ruling that placed some constraints on the deportation operations of ICE in LA. But Stephen Miller said that the ruling came from a communist judge in LA who ordered ICE to report directly to her and radical left NGOs, not the president. This is another act of insurrection against the United States and its sovereign people. I think they have some kind of like right-wing chat GPT that they can just.
It's insane. Like, they're all starting to sound like Andy No. I swear to God, it's insane. I mean, some of you will know what I mean by that. But so what is this insurrection talk has me? I don't know what he means by communists and lefty NGOs. What is he even smoking there? I don't know. That makes no sense to me. But I do think the fact that he's choosing to use the word insurrection here is quite key. There's another ruling that's going to be coming up where they're going to argue against sending the military in. What's that called again? The posse
comitatus.
Yes, thank you. Right. So the only way they're allowed to do that, right, is if there's a federal insurrection against the federal government. So I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, all of these guys are kind of like slipping in this word insurrection into everything they're saying publicly, which is absurd. Stephen Miller, there is no damn insurrection here. We are arguing against you doing unconstitutional things. It is that simple. End of story. But I think that that's what they're laying the groundwork for. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin? The whole insurrection thing.
I don't see any evidence of it. I mean, people sit around these neighborhoods, right? And they say, "What insurrection?" I can go walk to my grocery store and I don't see any. I mean, people who are from countries that have to deal with insurrections, not to mention the few hours we saw of an actual kind of uprising at the Capitol in 2021.
So they all think that wasn't an insurrection, right? And clearly that was. There were people in the Capitol building trying to stop the certification of our election. But that wasn't an insurrection, according to Steve Miller. Like, it's everything with these guys is like Orwellian doublespeak.
Yeah.
Truly.
So this is an insurrection. If you were actually stopping the operations, to my knowledge, nobody has actually stopped ICE operations.
They haven't. They're just filming and trying to like get out of their way. The point of ICE Block, for example, or any of the rapid response movements that are happening, and they are definitely out there happening, is to have folks avoid ICE in the first place, right? Yes. That is the point. And that is perfectly in their constitutional rights to do so. Nothing they're doing in that capacity is illegal. ICE
Yeah.
doesn't have the authority to stop people from avoiding them, especially when they're breaking the law. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to bring up the times that we've seen them smash windows too, because people are refusing to roll down their windows. Well, they don't have to roll down the window. You don't have a warrant. You're not saying who you are. You're refusing to identify yourself. So again, all of these problems that are being created by ICE's actions or DHS's actions, period, end of story. It is that simple.
The point to end on is that it is our First Amendment right to announce to communities that ICE is going to be present. You should watch out because everyone's due
Right.
process rights are being systematically violated. And
Exactly.
also, these things that people are being rounded up aren't crimes like murder or sexual assault or
Like,
burglary or whatever. We're talking about basically all of a sudden the arbitrary decision has been made that their
right.
citizenship or their
Has
residency
been
in the
revoked.
US is
Yeah.
not valid. Yeah, it's not valid.
It's that simple. And in fact, let me also point out another thing that happened a week and a half ago is ICE agents showed up at court and started arresting people that were there. Wait for this, Kevin. This is insane to me. They arrested people that were there to uh, be witnesses for criminal trials. These are people that are testifying on behalf of the prosecutor against somebody that committed a crime. What does ICE do? They arrested them. Okay, so
Yeah.
now that also has a second chilling effect. Why would anybody report an actual crime now? Because there is still crime going on in the city, right? And these immigrant populations and communities also have crime in them. They shouldn't be left hanging in regards to that. But there's so many levels to this onion that are messed up. I can't even.
These cases against immigrants are basically being closed
Yeah,
and then they're leaving courthouses and then ICE is just picking them up because there's an
that's right.
advantage to them if they don't have pending immigration proceedings.
That's
So
correct. That's correct. And
and
let
that's
me add one thing before I know I have to go, but let me add one thing so people understand because I don't think this got a lot of attention when it happened. What started this off in Los Angeles is ICE had done exactly that. They were picking people up. These were folks abiding by the law. They came here in the proper way looking for asylum. They're not citizens yet, but they're required to do these check-ins with the government. They have been doing their check-ins. When they went to do their last check-in, they were arrested by ICE. So these are people that are doing the things they're supposed to be doing, and now they've been arrested. What made it worse was some of these ICE agents decided to trick family members to come down and arrested them too. So they were calling up family members and basically saying, hey, can you come pick up your loved one, blah, blah, blah. So they would come to get them and they got arrested too. So they were holding entire families, including children, in the basement of the detention center, the Metropolitan Detention Center. And that was one of the first flashpoints that happened that started the ball rolling on all of these protests. That happened. And then the next day we saw a raid in the Garment District that went south where flashbangs were being deployed and whatnot. And there had already been a crowd at the Metropolitan Detention Center for this other thing. So then that happened. And it just kind of like, I knew that was like, that's it. People are going to lose their minds. Rightfully so. It's not right. It's just, I mean, what can you say?
all right. Well, we'll stay in touch with you and
Yeah,
then others in LA because it's been the focal point for all of the
yeah.
response to ICE, though this is really happening nationwide with That was Tina-Desiree Berg. I thank her for being a guest on the Dissenter Update. And as I said there, I'll pay attention. We'll be paying attention to what happens in LA. And as press freedom continues to be at stake, perhaps we'll have her back on to discuss further developments. I appreciate all of you for tuning in and listening and watching, and also being subscribers and supporters of the independent journalism done by the Dissenter. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode, but until then, take care of yourselves and keep up the fight.